Everybody ready? Kia ora koutou katoa. Thanks for coming along today. I'm just going to make a few introductory remarks and Minister Jackson will say a few things and then we'll happily take your questions. Just note that Minister Woods isn't with us today. She was at the vaccine announcement in Auckland and is making her way back to Wellington right now. I'm delighted today to be able to announce the resolution to the dispute at Ihumātao. Firstly, I want to thank a number of people. In particular, I want to thank the Maori King and the Kingitanga movement for their support for this process. We would not have been able to reach a resolution unless that had happened. I want to thank all of the parties involved in the negotiations. This has been complex. It has been a challenging environment, not only for mana whenua, but for Fletchers and also for the Crown. And the fact that we have been able to come to this resolution is a tribute to the patience of all of those people involved. I want to give special thanks to my Maori caucus colleagues, represented here today by Minister Jackson, who've played an incredibly important role in helping us get to where we are today. I do want to acknowledge Fletchers as well. On the 26th of July 2019, they agreed to down tools at the site to be able to work through a process like this. It has taken a long time to get here, and they have shown a great degree of patience as well. As we look forward from here, the process will begin now with a Kingitanga-led process with the Ahika to determine who exactly is involved from that perspective within what's called the Rōpū Whakahaere, which is the group that will also include the Crown and the Kingitanga and Auckland Council as an observer, who will then decide by consensus what the final use of the land is. So it's a two-stage process, beginning with that Kingitanga-led process and then moving into the work of the Rōpū Whakahaere. That work will focus on housing, and the government has purchased this land under the Land for Housing program. It is our intention that the kind of housing that would be developed there would be what we would describe as a sensitive housing solution. So that would be potentially papakainga housing, housing for kaumātua and kuia from the Ahika, and also potentially some public housing as well. There's also scope within this agreement to be able to recognise the cultural and heritage significance of the site in terms of its usage as well. The final outcome of that is what the Rōpū Whakahaere will work together to decide. This is an innovative and unique solution for these unique circumstances, but I believe it is the right thing to do. We had a situation that was on its way to being my generation's bastion point, and I was not prepared, and the government was not prepared to stand to the side and allow what could have been a very divisive and destructive period of time to happen. So I believe we've come up with a solution that is appropriate to the circumstances of this whenua. It is something where we have involved as many of those who have an interest as possible. There is still some time to go in this process, but ultimately it will lead, I believe, to an enduring solution which engages all of the people who need to be engaged in this particular piece of land. Minister Jackson.
Kia ora. Yesterday, I myself and the Prime Minister spoke with the King Tuheitia, who has really shown some leadership over this kaupapa. So we were really pleased that him and Tainui are incredibly supportive of this solution and this strategy. For us as a Maori caucus and Maori ministers, this is a really major kaupapa. A number of us have been working on this at ground level for the last 12 months, and so we've been complementing the work that Minister Robinson has been doing in terms of the negotiations. Some of us have had to work on the ground particularly with Makoto Marae, and it's been tough, but I'm really pleased that they've been able to come together. So it's just, in our view, a wonderful sort of resolution. Well, we're not, it's not a total resolution, but we're on the path, we're on the right path now. So I just wanted to say how pleasing it is for us as a Māori caucus, because there has been some criticism of us with regards to this kaupapa that we've been too slow, etc., but I think we've got there. So thanks to Kingitanga, the King, and in particular to Minister Robinson, and of course our Prime Minister, who intervened in the first place. Kia ora.
Thanks, Willie. Questions? Well, that was the subject of a negotiation, as you can imagine, with Fletcher's. I think if Fletcher's would say that this sort of breaks even for them in terms of the land. I've seen estimates of its value significantly higher than that. I believe that this is an appropriate price to pay that recognises what Fletcher's paid for the land in the first place, the costs that they've incurred over the last few years. And from a taxpayer point of view, it's important to me that we now have the ability for this land to be used for housing and for other purposes too.
How binding is that clause of the MOU about not recognising and acknowledging the treaty settlement claim in terms of protecting the Crown against future challenge?
So obviously the whole agreement is binding on the parties who have signed it. Kingitanga have worked very closely with particularly Makaurau Marae and Kauaranaki in the development of this, and so our understanding is all parties are bound by the agreement. As I said, this is a unique agreement for a unique set of circumstances. No, that doesn't, but obviously this has not been the subject of a treaty settlement, in particular not from the Waikato Tainui settlement. The process that the Kingitanga now lead with the Ahika includes a range of groups who do have an interest, but the whole point of this process is that they are at the table, they are not only being consulted, they are part of the decision-making process.
So you don't buy the argument from critics that this will open up a can of worms, even though that particular site was not subject to a settlement?
Well, because this is not, so let's be very clear, this is not part of the treaty settlement process, and that is acknowledged by Kingitanga and by the parties to the agreement, so it's quite different from that.
And you're confident that that will achieve future claims at bay?
I am, and this is a process that is unique and innovative, and it's one that actually provides for consensus decision-making and consensus decision-making involving the ahika of this whenua. So I believe this particular set of circumstances is unique, and it's one that will endure. Well, the Crown now owns the land, and so from here we move forward depending on what the final exact usage of the land is as to particular ownership issues.
The MOU, though, does seem rather still open in regards to that question of long-term ownership.
Well, long-term use is the most important element of the MOU, and so from our perspective we will now discuss those issues. Obviously that depends a lot on what the land is actually ultimately used for, in terms of how the Crown even considers it. So for example, if there is there's one proposal that's been around for a cultural centre to be built, obviously there'd be considerations around who might own that.
I think you can do both. That's what Minister Robinson's saying. You can look after the cultural obligations and you can do the housing side of things. That housing might be kaumatua housing, might be community housing. That's the beauty of the settlement, I think.
But in the future, is there a possibility that the ownership will go from the Crown to Mana whenua?
That will be the subject of the discussion of the Ropu Whakahaere. If it's bought for land for housing, it has to be used for housing purposes. There is some scope to be able to include heritage and cultural recognition within that, but obviously as the discussions go on we'll see where it lands.
But if that does happen, what's the quid pro quo or the return for the taxpayers? If the ownership then transfers, the taxpayers who funded that and there's housing to help, potentially limited.
And as I say, if we get to that point, then there will be considerations about funding at that point. But for now, it has been purchased for the purpose of housing. There will be housing on the site, but the Ropu Whakahaere has to do its work to work out what else might be on the site.
What's the risk that there's a $29.9 million transaction for taxpayers that then ends up in Mana?
Again, what I'm saying is that if there were to be significantly different outcomes on the land beyond housing, there would be other conversations to be had about funding. We're getting well ahead of ourselves here, but if there is to be usage beyond housing, there is room within the current agreement for that, but if it changed extensively from that, then we would look again at the funding issues. Well, this was not part of the treaty settlement process. That's the important point to note. When Waikato Tainui did their settlement, this was in private ownership within the Wallace family. It was not considered within that. So it is important to see this for what it is. It is a unique settlement outside of the treaty settlement process.
You believe the treaty process does not involve private homeland?
Correct. And so this is not part of the treaty settlement process.
Is that the way things should go, remain?
We're not doing anything here to unpick the current treaty settlement process. Sorry, Mikey? Yeah, look, we have purchased it under the Land for Housing program, and that gives you, and it's written into the MOU, you can see a very clear outline of the fact that there will be housing here. What we're after is a sensitive housing solution, one that helps meet the needs of the mana whenua. So that will potentially include housing for kaumātua and kuia. It also potentially could include the model that we call papakainga housing.
Yeah.
But also, in addition to that, there is the scope, as written in the agreement, for public housing as well. So that's the shape of the kind of housing development we would envisage. But again, all of this is now subject to the discussions that the Rōpū Whakahaere will have.
The agreement suggests that those talks could take up to 5 years. Would you expect it would be that long before any housing is actually built? Sometimes
it takes a long time to do the right thing. And we've seen that over the last 18 months. What it does ask, the MOU does ask people to do is move promptly, but we've got to work through a process here. This is an innovative solution. It's one where what we'll get is an enduring solution, even if it takes a little bit of time. I'm very open to visiting the site, but what we have done throughout this process is take our lead from King Tuheitia, and we will take our lead from him and the kingitanga as to when the appropriate time to visit is.
Well, he's coming back to us. We spoke to him about it yesterday, and we said we'll leave it with you when appropriate time for the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister. It's up to them, and the Prime Minister's waiting for that indication from him.
I don't know.
We don't know. We can't.
It'll depend on the view of the king and the
King
availability of ministers.
The Prime Minister referred to guidance and advice that she had been taken from Kingitanga, so presumably there's been some discussion about timing.
Not particularly on that point. It is in the hands of King Tuheitia.
Yeah, I mean, we put it to him yesterday. He said he'll think about it. We'll wait for that recommendation.
We went through a number of options, as you can imagine, over the last year or so as to how this might work. And obviously we were keen to see some housing on the site. We thought that was an important part of this. What we got back in response was an agreement, certainly from Kingitanga and their discussions with those ahika, that they too thought there was the possibility of that, but that there needed to be a discussion about how that balanced with cultural and heritage considerations. So it arose, I couldn't give you a specific date, but it certainly arose during the discussions.
So early in the last 12 months?
Relatively early, yeah.
Has it been easier without New Zealand First years possible?
Well, I don't think it's any secret that New Zealand First were not supportive of the kind of outcome that we're announcing today. So we've taken the opportunity post-election to revisit where we were at, had some more discussions with all of the players involved and come to this resolution.
There are a lot of Māori lands of significance that sit in private ownership. Does this set the precedence for how the Crown is going to interact with Māori going forward in lands in question?
No, I believe this is a unique solution for this particular area. This is a situation that we all know how it was playing out in July last year. And so we believe, given the involvement of the kingitanga, the role that they've played in drawing people together, that this is the right solution for this piece of land. I'm not going to speculate on what other people might think about or what they might do. We've done the right thing in this situation.
Is it going to take a ginormous protest in order for the Crown to engage with Māori in lands of significance that are in private ownership?
No, I mean, we engage with Māori all the time. And so from a Crown perspective, we'll continue to do that. This is a particular set of circumstances. This is a particular situation with a very innovative solution that has been put forward. I don't know if you want to say anything.
Yeah, no, totally what Grant is saying. Iwi are buying into this, Ruku. They they're very happy with the solution. It was tough in Auckland in terms of pulling all the tribes together, but they support what we're doing here, and they're realists in terms of the whole system. This isn't going to open a can of worms at all, because the important thing here is this was not part of the treaty settlement process, and we keep emphasising that this was not part of a treaty deal. Ai runga i tō kōrero tō whakahea, engari kei te tautoko tō tātou iwi tā mātou rautaki i tēnei wā.
Well, that is to be determined, and obviously what we have said is that there will be housing, but we want to give good faith to the process we've agreed to. In order to make sure we got an outcome, we've come up with a working group essentially that now has the job of getting consensus. So I can't give a number today. If I did give a number today, I'd be undermining that process. There will be housing on the site. Look, I think it would be quite clear that the scale of the Fletcher's development wouldn't be regarded by any of the parties to this as the kind of sensitive housing development we're looking for. But I'd also suggest to you that actually the notion that 450 houses were going to be able to be built on this land is actually fanciful. All of the parties involved came to the table because we recognise that the process that Fletchers were leading was going to be very, very difficult to be able to implement. It was going to lead to enormous disruption and division. That's why I think we've done the right thing here. Yes, there'll be housing on the site, but we will also recognise the cultural significance of this whenua and the heritage significance of it. And that is one of the reasons why Auckland Council maintain an observer role. No, I don't believe so at all. Shelley Bay, obviously the land there was the subject of a settlement, and it was up to the Port Nicholson Block Trust what they did. They took a decision to on-sell that land. Beyond that, I won't say too much, because there is court action underway.
Just on GDP, how much is...
Can we just check if there's anything else on this first? I'm sure Willie will have something to say about this, but from my perspective, we've been working through Kingitanga because there are many interests in this whenua. Pānia represents one group of interests, but there were others as well. That's why the role of King Tuheitia and his team was so significant, was their ability to draw together all of the parties, not just Soul and not just Pānia. So, we've been mainly working through them, and I think it's been successful. But Willie...
but I work with them on the ground, and I saw Kiani Matata 2 days ago, who was and she's, along with Pānia, the co-leader of that group, and she's very comfortable in terms of the process. I've got to pay her credit, and Pānia a lot of credit too, in terms of being patient and working with us. So I know that there's a lot of support out there in the Māngere area, and so we just mihi to her for her work, but that group, that Makoto group, deserved a bit of credit because they've particularly pushed it out in terms of the public, in terms of the historical significance of that site.
That 5-year time frame is steering through.
Yep.
Do you expect to see shovels in the ground?
Look, we want to move as swiftly as we possibly can here, but this is a unique and an innovative process. It's also, as I mentioned before, a two-stage process. So the first part of that is in the hands of King Tuheitia and Kingitanga to draw the ahika together. Once the Rōpū Whakahaere gets going, we want to move as swiftly as we can, but the whole point here is to get consensus and get an enduring solution. So while it might take a little bit longer at the start, the outcome at the end will be one that I think all New Zealanders will be able to be proud of.
I want to show some respect too to that Rōpū Whakahaere, because there'll be some competition probably for the representatives. There's 4 Maori representatives there, and we're talking two Crown representatives. So, a lot of people might want to go on that Rōpū Whakahaere. We want to give them respect. They've waited a while, and this is a unique solution, and we think the right process and solution.
Does that mean it's more likely that within 5 years there'll be a plan in place and then the
So the 5 years is not a target, it's a time limit essentially.
Yeah.
We would hope to be moving in advance of that time. Okay, GDP. Oh, look, I think this is a tribute to the hard work of New Zealanders as we came out of lockdown. The bounce back is very, very solid, greater than the Treasury expected, and one that gives us a really good starting point to now go forward to look towards Budget 21.
And just quickly, what would your message be to struggling sectors like the tourism?
Yeah. Look, the government continues to want to act as a partner with those sectors who are still affected. What we saw in the GDP numbers was a massive bounce back for hospitality, retail, tourism and so on. I totally recognise that there are still tough times ahead, but the government, I think, working with New Zealanders has shown that actually we've been able to come out of a massive health and economic crisis strongly, and I look forward to working with them into next year.
Minister, when you got first briefings, and do you consider yourself adequately briefed by Treasury that describing house prices might have an effect on universities?
Well, obviously the Treasury, like most economists, said that they thought the impact of COVID-19 would be a significant reduction in house prices. They weren't alone in that. Most bank economists were actually saying that. It's obviously on the public record now that changed, and Treasury's advice post the pre-election update has changed as well.
Do you keep yourself, do you wish you could go back in time and change one different?
I think in 2020, anyone who tries to go back in time is on an unwise journey.
The scenario where,
A lot of trolleys today, that's what I make of the scenario.
yeah, we have the scenario of John Key, who's the chairman of the country's biggest bank, moving more aggressively on LVRs than our Reserve Bank.
Yeah, look, obviously it's up to each bank to do that. When the LVR announcement from the bank that they were looking to reimpose restrictions came through, I actually said at the time that I encouraged everyone to move as soon as possible. So it's positive for him that in the bank that they're doing that, and I'm sure other banks will look closely at what they've done.
Do you think other banks should follow suit?
I imagine many of them will. All right, thanks everyone. Good night.